All right. So normally I would download these videos for something like this, but I was having troubles doing it. So we'll work with it. So all right. So first up, we'll do, and I'm basically just doing it in the order that they came in for the most part. So we'll start with Joshua here. So now Joshua did give me a set that was for 5 reps, but we'll look at this one anyway. So this is something that because this, and I think he even mentioned here yeah, lockout. So this is not too bad of a pull, okay? But we're going to see something that a lot of people struggle with, um, and so this is a really good example of kind of what you're looking at. So Josh gets in a pretty good Josh's hip position here is pretty good. In fact, I think it's pretty much exactly where he wants it to be. Now he hasn't set his back yet, so there's going to be flexion here. Okay, but you see the knees are basically in the elbow pockets. And so that tells me the bar is, if not perfect, it's damn near over midfoot. Okay, that's kind of where you want to look for a reference point. Everybody's a little different, sure, but very rarely is your knee going to stick way out past your elbow, and very rarely is it going to be way back behind. It's going to be in that pit. Okay, so that's a good little check you can have for yourself. Okay, so this is pretty solid from the setup, from the standpoint of bar has to be over midfoot, and it does have to be over your midfoot um, for a heavy lift. It's just the reality. Okay, here's what happens. So notice how far his hips drop. Okay, goes from here to here. Now this is a pretty typical move, and you have to understand that in setting your back into extension, we do not want to drop the hips. That is not easy, okay? Because the hamstrings and the low back are fighting one another. You could kind of think of it that way, and it's a very uncomfortable, it's a very hard position to maintain, to obtain, and to maintain. But that is what you want to do, because it is inefficient to drop the hips because they're going to go right back up. So let me show you what I mean. So now let's just slow, boom. Now the bar. Now this is really where the bar, where the weight is starting to come off the floor. The outside, because of some flex in the bar, these outside plates, they might be off the bar a little, off the floor a little bit. They might not quite be, but they're okay. And look where his hip position is. So this is where it has to be, and it has to be here, because where your hips are affect where the bar is relative to the midfoot. So watch, the hips are here, bar is over midfoot. My guess is he took time to get into a position where the bar is over the midfoot. Now watch the plates when he drops his hips, and watch them roll forward, right? Because when the hips drop, the knees are flexing. If the knees are flexing, the shin angle becomes closed relative to the floor here, and so it's pushing the bar forward. Okay, so now you're forward of midfoot. But we are bound by the physics of our reality, of our world. And that bar is not going to move for a 1 rep max, and this is a relative. So it's not going to be the same for everyone, but something relatively heavy and relative to the person's body weight. Okay, there's these factors matter, but you have to have the bar over your midfoot. And so he's going to pull, he's going to get forward. Now things are, and you can see his whole body kind of forward a little bit. You can see it better when we reverse, because we can see everything lurch forward a little bit, because he's started with the bar forward. And then things are going to balance out and get over the center. Now, here's the big problem, how this connects to his lockout. So this is a pretty decent back position as far as it being set in extension. But when your hips start low, and you have all of this space now that the body is going to move before the weights leave the platform. You've introduced slack into the system. And this makes it very difficult to maintain a back issue because what you're kind of doing is jerking the bar off the floor. You're yanking the bar off the floor. Now, when we play this in real speed, you can see that very aggressive acceleration out of that. And the deadlift is not really a fast movement. In fact, it's almost definitionally a slow lift. Okay. So whether this is just kind of a subconscious attempt to add acceleration into the movement in the um, in the hopes that it will help lift the weight. I don't know. People do things that they don't necessarily even know. I'm not saying Joshua's doing this on purpose or whatever. You know, I don't. You might not even be cognizant of the dropping of the hips. That might be something that's happening. He's not even really necessarily aware of. Okay, he's setting his back, not realizing that he's dropping his hips in that attempt to set the back. But when you have that explosive pull off the floor like that, and you have several inches of movement where the hips are going to rise, you have really increased the chances pretty dramatically. You're going to lose your back position because you've started, and then once all that excess uh, distance is taken up from the movement, now you're kind of jerked. You know, you've run the rope is now you've gotten the slack out of the rope, and now you're caught by the actual load of the bar, and so now you've pulled yourself out of that position. And that's going to make the lockout much more difficult because now you have all of this flexion in the top half of the back in the thoracic spine to account, and you have to fix at the top. You see, when you're there's going to be some little level of flexion, especially with a really heavy 1 RM. There's going to be some small amount of flexion no matter what you do. Um, you know, that's just the kind of the nature of things. But when you introduce a ton of flexion relative, uh, you now have to make up for that one at the top. So, and ideally, the deadlift, we really want to just be setting the back, keeping it almost perfectly in extension, and then the main work here is the hip extension, and the back just kind of levers up. Okay, and now you're at lockout. But when you've introduced this at the beginning, now you're extending the hips, and at the top, you have to now get everything up here. And so it's inefficient. I'm not particularly worried about an injury. A lot of people will be, and they'll tell you whatever. People have been picking up things with a rounded back. Okay, look, no one's dying from it. I'm not saying you should do it. I'm not saying you should do it. But I'm saying be less concerned about an injury, especially if you're working with weights that you have built up to, and be more concerned about it being inefficient because that's really the name of the game here. We need to be efficient. The more efficient you can move, the more weight you can move. Okay. Otherwise, these are not too bad, but that's a big thing. And if you can get that fixed, Josh, where you are not dropping your hips in the process of trying to set your back, okay, then because your hips, you cannot pull a heavy load with hips too low or too high. They are going to get where they need to, whether you want it to be or whether you intend them to be or not. They're gonna go there. You might as well get them there right away and save yourself some time. Okay, that's really what this boils down to. Save yourself the energy, be more efficient because your hips are going to go where they have to go. So you might as well be, putting them there intentionally. Now here, I like the other view a little better. Not the end of the world, but so there's some stuff we can't quite see. My guess is just based on everything. I think the bar is probably more over his midfoot right now, and then as he kind of drops his hips a little bit, it's going to shoot forward. Okay, and then look at this flexion that's kind of introduced as he pulls. Now, some of that is because mechanically he kind of has to allow for some flexion in order for the bar to not stay forward of his midfoot. Because if he's dropped his hips, and he's pushed his knees a little too far forward, which has rolled the bar a little too far forward. There's one other thing you could do to kind of bring the center of mass, the combined center of mass, into a good spot, and that's to kind of shorten the front, which is adding a little bit of flexion. So some of that is probably a natural reaction, um, but so you want to keep your hips about there. I mean, right about there is where you want your hips. That's where you want your hips. You drop them down, and there's flexion. The bar is floating away a little bit there. Okay. So you got to set your back a little harder, and you got to be more intentional about it. So that's a rotating of the chest. So showing your chest to the wall in front of you, but you really want to try to work to keep the hips where they are and not let them drop. And like I said, right about there is probably about where you need to be. I mean, this isn't the perfect angle. I've only seen, a handful of reps of yours. Okay. Um, and I would try to slow down the initial push off the floor, or the initial movement off the floor. Try to ease into that a little more, because the aggressiveness of it, I don't think, is helping you keep your back at all. And in fact, I think it's working against you. So right here is a pretty decent setup. Right there, right there, right there. Rotate the chest really hard, keeping a lot of foot pressure. Okay, because the hips drop because the knees bend. So if you're pushing into the floor and not allowing your knees to flex, the hips will maintain their position. So that's really what it is, a rotating of the chest up while maintaining a lot of foot pressure. And you could kind of think of this like you've got, I don't know what you have on the bar. It doesn't matter. It looks maybe like it's 405. Is that 4 plates? Whatever it is, doesn't matter. Let's just say it's 405. Okay. You've got 405 on the bar. You want to be having like 404 pounds of pressure at the feet. You know what I mean? You're just right on that cusp. Right on that cusp. So then the hips don't drop. We rotate the chest up. The back is extended. We have all this tension built, and then you just tap a little bit more pressure. You just tap on the gas that little bit more, and now you're at 406, 407, 408, whatever it is, whatever actual force production you have that's lifting the weight, right? But you want to be right on that cusp. And so, but you have to be applying the foot pressure there, the leg drive, whatever you want to kind of think of it as, okay? And not allow the legs to break even for a moment. And in fact, what will help is if you think of this as a leg movement directly off the floor, you want to really be keeping your back angle for a couple inches off the floor. The back remains in its position. The knees extending is kind of the first part of this. And then after just a couple inches, it's not a ton, then the hips start to extend. Okay, so if you want to think of this as a foot first, it's very easy to think of this because the bar is in your hands, so you feel the weight in your hands. It's very easy to think of this as getting my chest up quickly. But you want to hang out down there just for a couple inches, where you let the legs do the work, and then the chest starts to rise as the hips come forward. Okay, and that will help keep your hip position. And that's going to be harder, and it's not going to feel good, and it might not even translate to very good performance at first. But from an efficiency standpoint, especially if you're having troubles with the lockout, you want your back set better, and you want to be able to maintain it throughout the rep so that your lockout is not a problem. Okay. But good work, man. Very good, very strong, very good. All right, so this is Lance. Now, these are pretty good, but so some similar issue basically is what Josh was, just slacking the bar, and this is very common. Very common. Now, this is a big, strong dude, so hey, man, you're lifting. It's good, but what I see is just this right here. Ideally, I don't want to see any body movement unless the plates are coming off the floor. Okay, and you can see the plates roll forward just a hair, right? As it's kind of pulling you forward just a little. And then we're back. And so we're just starting with the bar, I think, just a hair forward. Hips need to be up just a little bit. And I know, look, that's the starting strength thing, right? Get your hips up, everybody. But like I said, the hips go where they go. You aren't going to be able to change that, right? And I'm not saying Lance is, and I'm not saying Joshua was saying that either. But The but a lot of people, that's kind of what everybody's saying it. But the hips, we tell you to put your hips there because that's where they have to do. That's where they have to be, man. But generally, these look pretty good. But you see the hips. Now, there's a little bit where I would say you see the hip drop there, just that ever so little bit there. Where are we at? Right there. Yeah. So you really want to try now. This could be two things here, kind of similar to what Josh was doing. So a lot of people, when they rotate the chest up trying to set it, they allow the hamstrings to slack a little bit because it's uncomfortable. The hips drop a little, okay, and the knees come forward just a little bit. So we want to avoid that. So again, same as with Joshua, foot pressure. What do you have on here? 400 pounds or whatever it is exactly. Whatever, it doesn't matter. 400 pounds. You have to keep tons of that foot pressure. 399, 399 and a half, however you want to think of it, because we don't want the hips to dip. Like I said, one, because they're going to come up anyway, so it's inefficient. But two, as it gets heavier, when the hips dip, the bar rolls. The hips dip, the bar rolls. There's no way around that. Okay, unless your hips are dipping and you're also leaning way back, I guess. But then you've got bigger problems. But if the hips drop, even that little bit, the bar rolls forward. And this is a set of 5, so this is well within your. I mean, it's heavy, but it's well within. But you start getting, and I'm sure Lance and Joshua knows this, from experience. The bar does not have to get that far forward of the midfoot before it is pulling you forward and it's a missed rep. So we want to get into the routine of not allowing our hips to drop. Now, this also might have been this little hip dip. It also might be just kind of this subconscious attempt at building momentum because we kind of instinctively think that helps. The deadlift is not a fast movement. We don't any little bit, and it's not much. We're kind of splitting hairs here. The hips drop an inch and a half or 2 inches or something. It's not a lot, but any bit of movement where the bar is not yet, where you're actually not lifting the weight yet, increases the chance of pulling you out of that position once you finally do. Okay. And we just don't want to pull the back out of position. Now this weight is moving well, so you can maintain your back pretty easily here. It looks good. But once it's easy, or I'm sorry, once it's really hard, that little bit of a yank is going to pull you into some flexion, which is maybe you'll pull through it. But I would offer up that you would be completing the rep in spite of and not because of. So same deal. Keep pressure at the feet. This is very common. Keep pressure at the feet, okay, so that we don't drop the hips that little bit right there and roll the bar forward just that little bit. Okay, but these are good, man. This is nice work, and I'm nitpicking. You're a strong dude. This is good stuff. So very good work. Very good work. All right, Dale. So these are pretty solid for you said you're getting back into it. I think is what it said. Yeah, first time back after it a bit. I mean, these look generally pretty good. Now, what I would say, so you've got this kind of extra step. So we have a 5-step deadlift setup, right? And Dale here is kind of adding a 4.5, which is this little rock back. It's very easy for people to feel like they're in their midfoot when really they're kind of in the balls of their feet, especially if you have an athletic background or just like doing athletic shit. The you're going to feel more comfortable. You're going to feel more at home, kind of on the balls of your feet in a more athletic stance. And so, one thing that can help if that's something that you do often, being on a little pitched forward a little bit in the deadlift setup, is to kind of think of this step 4.5, which is this kind of rock back. And you might have to think of it as rocking back into the heels, but really you're rocking back over and back into your midfoot. And so Dale is doing that here on these, and that's a perfectly fine thing to do. However, we have to make sure all of these steps, even with the addition of that half step in between 4 and 5, all of these steps are steps in of themselves. They have to have breaks, momentary breaks where they're not combined together. Okay. And so we have to make sure, and what Dale is doing a little bit of here is he's rolling that 4.5 step of rocking back right into step 5, which is to push the floor and lift. And so you see here, the first one, not so bad. What you're going to see is this as we get this rock back here at the rock back, and we want just a tad bit more. We're breaking that up so that we're not getting into the habit of rolling back. And that's a good example of it right there. You see, so that he's going, rolls back, and then rolls right into the rep. What I'd really want is a very obvious, because here's the position. We break for just a moment, and then we pull because we just don't want to get into the habit of rolling back and then pulling. As it gets heavier and heavier, that's going to get us off balance, cause problems, and so we want to make sure that those steps are broken up. But again, kind of splitting hairs here, but it's something you want to get ahead of. Now, I would say with this, the only other thing really I would say is we got to speed up this set, and we got to reduce the time in between reps here. So the deadlift sucks. It's very heavy. It's very hard when you're doing it correctly. It sucks. But this much time in between reps really can take it out of you. Okay. And so you have to be kind of, excuse me, even when it sucks, you just have to go. Bar comes down, exhale, inhale, brace, set your back, and go. I mean, it has to be. You just have to push through, even when because otherwise you're going to get to this fourth and fifth rep, and you're going to be gassed out. So the one other thing I would point out too, just for those watching who might be interested, as this fatigue sets in on this last rep, you're going to watch how he's really pushing at the end to get this bar up. Okay. And you look at this here. So one thing you keep in mind here is that lockout is that the hips come through. And so this is not exactly what Dale is doing here, but it looks close enough to it to where I think it's a decent example to bring up for those watching who might be new to deadlifting. The position at the lockout of the chest is proud. And what can happen, especially for a new lifter, is you can get to this proud position because you're really working hard to lift the chest at the end and overextending the back. And you could get to this position where the chest looks pretty good. Like even here, that looks like a pretty good chest position, really. But you notice that the hips are lagging behind. So we want the hips over the feet, the shoulders over the hips, stacked up. So just something, I mean, Dale here finishes pretty good, but it's something to keep in mind because it's very easy. I see it often where this proud chest that comes through, but the hips are lagging behind, and it feels right. You can even see it in your peripheral. You can see your chest come through and you think, okay, that's what I want. But we got to make sure that we're pushing the hips through and then getting that proud chest. But good job here, man. Okay. So Fred Hall here on the last. Dude, these are good, man. I mean, honestly, I don't really have much to say. A little bit of knee, knees caving in just a little bit on the way up. But, just a little. So hold them out. But this is a good set, man. Looks strong. I like the control. Um, I might. Yeah, I mean, I would say maybe I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence. I kind of the yeah, I don't know, man. I was gonna say the as you're getting into the bottom, it almost looks a little bit like there's a slight loss of control, like there's a kind of a quick little bit at the end. So what I mean is, and actually, and I don't know that I'm seeing that, to be honest with you, because I'm trying to find things. That's kind of the point. That's kind of what I'm doing as a coach in this whatever is I'm kind of trying to find things. Easy to invent some things. But one thing you'll see, and I don't really think it's happening here, but one thing for anyone who might be watching, you want to control descent, and you want like cruise control is the way I kind of would think of it. I don't necessarily get super caught up in how fast the descent is. I mean, it needs to be in control, so there are limits, right? But that's more of a you know it when you see it type deal. But whatever the speed is exactly, it just needs to be set all the way down, cruise control. And what you find a lot of guys doing is mixing up the, and again, I don't think that Fred's doing that, but what you see a lot of guys doing is they'll say, you know, I want to take advantage of the stretch reflex at the bottom. Okay. Um, so, and so they almost kind of control, dive bomb into the bottom. But that's counterproductive. It's not really going to help you, and the stretch reflex is not really going to. You're not going to benefit from doing that. And so, you know, part of my eye kind of thinks that that's happening, maybe a tiny bit here, but also, to be honest, Fred, I think I might be just looking for something to bitch about. This is a good set. Knees coming in a little bit. Try to hold those out a little bit better as you drive your hips up. That's going to help you with your hip extension. So it's going to make your squat stronger. Okay, but this is a strong squat, man. Very good set. Very good work. And then last but not least, big dog here. So you know this is pretty much perfect. Fred, if you can get your squat to this, you know you'll be a lot better off. You know you'll be really. I mean, you could probably get your squat to 700 squatting like this. So this is the perfect starting strength squat. Everyone should be doing it this way. And I don't care if you don't think it's right. You're wrong. So, all right. If you hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys like the feedback. If you want some clarification or any questions about anything, let me know. But I appreciate you guys sending in the videos, and hope it was helpful at least a little bit. All right. So yeah, man, appreciate it, guys. Take care.